Just Picture It is a show and an experiment, and I'm so glad you're able to join us. Drawing pictures is something humans have done for thousands of years. Yes, they can be beautiful. Today we're going to explore questions that go beyond the beauty of pictures. Why do we draw pictures? Can pictures make it easier to talk together, to understand each other? And if we want to imagine a better future, can pictures help us imagine together? A picture tells 1,000 words, so can we use pictures to get beyond the words, to share those concepts and dreams so we can bring them to reality? In this show, we'll be talking about how companies and organizations in and around the Silicon Valley and now beyond are beginning to use the language of pictures to help innovate, to bring forward those things that are new, to bring people to work together in new ways. Yosemite Valley is one of the natural wonders of the world, a precious resource for California and the United States. David Sibbet pioneered using pictures interactively in planning by both businesses and communities. Yosemite National Park used this picture approach to help plan its priorities in conjunction with the public. David, tell us how they started to do this.
It's a very interesting story. It really began a couple of years ago when Don Neubacher became the new superintendent of Yosemite. And he had actually gotten acquainted with this way of working back in the Presidio of San Francisco. I think if you remember, the 6th Army had this beautiful 1,400-acre Presidio, which has been a garrison for over 200 years in this spot. And it was decommissioned and turned over to the National Park Service. And at that time, they began a very intricate planning process, which involved lots of community meetings. This is one that was being held in the old officers' quarters. And in these meetings, they really wanted to find out from the community what the best uses would be for this unbelievable resource.
Now, this was not a simple process, I understand. I mean, there was controversy. People said, don't do this, don't touch that. It's San Francisco. We protest about everything. So how did pictures help?
Well, we knew we had to orient. We were asked at the Grove Consultants International, my company, to facilitate a series of 6 visioning meetings throughout the region. And in order to orient people to what they were doing in these meetings, we really needed to get them quickly into the right frame of mind, into a spirit of contributing. And we thought that big murals would be the best way to do this. So we initially, when they walked into these meetings, if you can imagine this long mural being up on the wall and you're a public person, this is a picture actually of the entire planning process in some detail. At this scale, what you can see are the yellow circles, which represented all of the different public input meetings. Now, the problem we were solving with this big picture was the problem of somebody over here on the left coming to one of these visioning sessions. And here, let me zoom in on this with a little tool here.
David, what was the time frame for all of this?
This was happening in the early 90s. In San Francisco. I think it was decommissioned in '88. And the park itself, if you notice on this over here, the park had a planning process represented by these wavy blue arrows, which follows a very rigorous process of getting public input, looking at different alternatives, and then they were going to upgrade the general management plan of the Presidio. At the same time, they were taking over some of the Presidio. The Army, this brown bar down here, was going through a closure process, and the city itself was coordinating.
Okay, so the green bar is getting bigger because they're taking over more stuff. The brown bar is getting smaller because the Army's pulling out.
Yes.
So this allows people to visually see the transition that's happening, not from black to white, but a gradual turnover and expansion.
And you can see the big branching part on the right was added, not because they knew precisely what was going to happen in that part of the planning, but what they knew is that would be the point if somebody came into one of these public meetings and said, I want this or that building. That was when they would be making those discussions and entertaining those proposals. So after they got oriented, they would go to the next thing that we would ask them to do, which is we had maps on all these tables of the Presidio, and here's a map.
Now, I can see as a member of the public that this picture is much more accessible than the previous one. While the murals, it's huge, and you're thinking city planners and landscape architects, but what does this mean to me, a mom who wants to take her child for walks? And what if I've got 3 dogs, and is there somewhere I can go? So I guess this is how you help people understand?
Well, we had a picture in addition to the large process map. We also had a picture that showed the Presidio like this, and around it we listed all the issues that people are concerned about: dog walking, sailboarding. Would the MPs or would the park police be able to keep people from just camping there, et cetera?
Oh, that's right. The homeless people.
But
did they still have a place to stay?
And the picture did engage people. Then we asked people, and I'm going to draw here, we had on the map of the Presidio circles, and we had squares, and the circles and the squares represented values and uses. And so if you can imagine the circles and squares, we asked then people sitting around this chart to actually tell us what they valued and wanted to preserve in the blue circles, what uses they wanted, and then along the bottom we allowed them to write in additional issues. So this went on for an hour, and then we asked those small groups to tell us, and on a mural as big as that first one, we recorded all of their ideas. So it was actually a very theatrical experience of being listened to.
Yes.
This is like a whole community being listened to. Well, Don Newbacher, the person who was the head of Yosemite, was experienced this. And he got very excited about it.
Yeah. And what happened? So he saw it work in the Presidio. And what was the challenge that Yosemite was facing that he thought he needed to go through this kind of big
this
process?
was not exactly the beginning of this. I mean, the idea of using very large murals started earlier. And I think you were very interested when we were talking about that this isn't just applied to government.
Yes. However, we're really wanting to focus on the government until a little bit later in the program, so that we'll switch to the private companies. So let's talk some more about how Yosemite and the Presidio worked. How I remember that when we talked earlier, the whole idea of using big pictures in the Presidio process came out of some landscape architect's approach to community involvement.
Yes.
I think somebody called Larry Halperin.
Yes, he was one of the first people who inspired me. He had a process called take part workshopping, where he would get people involved, like the city of Pomona, when he did a vision for them.
Pomona, California.
Yeah, and he would choreograph people going out into the community and experiencing it, and coming back to a gymnasium where he had large blueprints, somewhat like this picture of the Presidio.
Yes.
Only this was the downtown Pomona.
Yeah.
And collage materials, markers, glitter, other things, and would have the community groups actually do a construct, kind of a montage of their idea of the future of Pomona.
Yes.
Then overnight, his young apprentices and architects would turn these into concepts. So they would come back the next day and they would see 7 or 8 urban planning concepts coming right out of the community thinking.
Yep.
So this take part workshopping was very influential when we were developing facilitation like this in the 70s.
Yes.